Well, there's gonna be some trouble, I know, cause I've got no buttons on my trousers, and my pins ain't none too strong. Hurry up, Mrs. Brown, I can feel it coming down, and it won't take none too long. Huzzah! Huzzah!
After OK Computer, Britpop was dead. British guitar music had lost its edge. Travis and Coldplay were there leading the way, with Cast, Embrace and Stereophonics filling the gaps. It was anthemic, aspirational, acoustic, but lacked energy and bite. But then, the Libertines. Taking notes from the Kinks, Jam, Clash and Strokes, they enlivened the British indie scene. Singles like What a Waster and Time for Heroes, reveling in reckless abandon, Wildian lyricism, and tales about rock and roll Valhalla. But by their first NME cover, the band were disintegrating under a wave of drugs, arrests and punch-ups. This is New British Canon, and this is the story of Can't Stand Me Now. This video is sponsored by Surfshark. Imagine this, you want to watch the dark fantasy film Pan's Labyrinth, but it is not on UK Netflix. What you need is a VPN to trick Netflix into thinking you are in the US, where they do have Pan's Labyrinth. Surfshark is that VPN. Just connect to the service and refresh the page, and it's there for you to enjoy. US Netflix users can also sneak onto a UK server to watch the vast array of Ghibli films available on UK Netflix. For example, Howl's Moving Castle, or even Spirited Away, and it works on all kinds of streaming services and regions. Whether on your laptop, phone or TV, Surfshark is easy to install and able to be run on an unlimited number of devices at the same time from one subscription. So that's safe, unrestricted surfing wherever you go. You can get Surfshark VPN at the link on screen, and if you enter the promo code Trash Theory, you will receive 83% off and 3 extra months for free. Not only this, but with a 30-day money-back guarantee, you have plenty of time to try out Surfshark risk-free. So surf safely with Surfshark. And now back to the Libertines. By the end of 2002, Britain was the Libertines to lose. In October, they released their debut album, the Mick Jones produced Up the Bracket, taking its name from a line in post-war radio sitcom Hancock's Half Hour, an allusion to getting a punch in the throat.
Oh, rubbish. Good punch up the bracket never hurt anybody.
The album was 36 buzzing minutes of punk pop bravado, taking the cool New York garage rock of the Strokes and reframing it through the lens of hyper-literate Englishness. His first single and title track delved into the dark recesses of London's nightlife.
He doesn't see the danger on show. They'll wind up like Joseph bloody in the hole.
While the jangle of Time for Heroes attempted to better the Lars, as Pete Doherty detailed his experiences in the May Day riots and reflected on England's cultural losses.
Fewer, more distressing sights than that of an Englishman in a baseball cap.
The UK music press was in love with this band, a flagship for the exciting new wave of British guitar music. But already, the Libertines were falling apart. Initially, the band formed in London in 1997, although they had various characters coming and going in the early days, not least the 70-year-old jazz drummer, dubbed Mr. Razcox. The core of the band had always been the dual guitarist vocalists, Pete Doherty and Carl Barat. Doherty was the dishevelled poet who loved the Smiths, Lars, Oasis, and Cockney skiffle group Chaz and Dave.
And pins ain't none too strong. Hurry up, Mrs. Brown, I can feel it coming down, and they won't take none too long.
Hurry up, Mrs. Brown. I can feel it coming down, and it won't take none too long.
Barat preferred Bowie and Dylan, and was the more adept guitarist. Despite being drawn to each other, their relationship was riddled with one-upmanship and chemical romances. We had some kind of inner storm in common that drove us together, even though a lot of the time we didn't actually want to be together. We didn't really get on, but I was fascinated by ideas he had about himself and the country. I'd never met anyone like him. It was riveting. Initially a high-energy skiffle group with killer lyrics. Things started coming together in 2001, when their new manager, Bani Pushchi, convinced them she could get them signed to UK indie powerhouse Rough Trade. She felt that with the Strokes' recent revolution in the rock market, signing to the label and the ensuing feverish praise from the NME, the Libertines could skew more towards the jam and buzzcocks and revive in Britain what the Strokes had sparked in America, solidifying the lineup with John Hassell on bass and Gary Powell on drums. The new songs impressed Rough Trade enough to take a chance, with buzz building due to their chaotic live shows, including a support slot for the Strokes. The Libertines ended up on the cover of NME before they'd released any actual music. Coinciding with the Queen's Golden Jubilee and posing before a Union Jack, the Libertines stole it away from intended cover stars, the all-too-American Fisher Spooner. In interviews, Barat and Doherty would be witty, vibrant, while talking wistfully and at length about the good ship Albion, a metaphorical boat named after an archaic word for Britain, that they helmed and was headed for Arcadia, where rock and roll was all you needed. It's where cigarettes grow on trees and all benches are made of denim. But the Central Twosome's competitive streaks were already beginning to show, climbing over each other to get the most attention. Most people fancy Carl more than me. For years I've been in his shadow, but now the worm has turned and I'm getting all the quotes. Yeah, why the fuck do you always quote Pete? Every time you ask a question, he starts yapping. Despite no radio airplay, the band's first single, the acerbic swearfest, What a Waster, managed to get to number 37 in the UK charts on Hype alone. Their next single, Up the Bracket, fared even better, reaching number 29.
It's just like he's in another world, he doesn't see the danger on show.
But the album sessions themselves showed that the Albion was listing slightly. The band, unable to get on with initial producer, Suede's Bernard Butler, replaced him with the Clash's Mick Jones.
And obviously deciding to work with Mick Jones wasn't a move of divine inspiration. Whose call was that? The entire band's?
I think it was Mick's idea.
Really?
Yeah.
How'd you get to know him?
He just turned up one day, and we thought it was just, you know, someone trying to get out the cold, turn up in our house with him with he had a can of beer and a dog.
You know, he's got a little dance he does. So you know if it's going well if he's doing his little dance.
Their rock and roll lifestyle and argumentative nature began to creep in, culminating in the duo's first proper fistfight. By this point, Barat had moved out of their shared apartment / squat, the Albion Rooms, and while Barat was smoozing with his new celebrity mates, Doherty had acquired a crack and heroin habit. I tried to address it with him, but I'm sure he convinced me it was within his stride. I do believe I tried everything to stop it taking hold, but for better or worse, it didn't work. There's a famous instructional shanty on what to do with a drunken sailor, but what does one do if the sailor is addicted to life-destroying drugs? In early 2003, the Libertines seemed to be in full sail. Time for Heroes was their biggest single yet, making it to the top 20 and resulting in their first appearance on Top of the Pops. At the NME Awards in mid-February, the band won Best New Band, and after supporting the likes of Morrissey and the reunited Sex Pistols, as well as having their own sellout UK headline tour, they had set their sights on the US, playing Coachella in addition to a few dates on either coast. The Libertines had even snagged a slot on David Letterman. But behind the scenes, they were travelling further into choppy seas. Doherty's deteriorating health coloured everything, his pale and skeletal appearance a cause for concern on Top of the Pops, while disputes and punch-ups weren't far behind. Doherty also objected to the Letterman song choice, which placed Barat centre stage, pushing the competitive bandmates further apart. On Letterman we did I Get Along, and even though he didn't write it, it's still seen as Carl's song, and I don't sing on it at all, of course. I thought for us to do a song that we both sung on might have brought us together. Between tours, Doherty had been arranging small impromptu shows on the band's website. Things came to a head when he scheduled one as a goodbye to the now besqualid Albion Rooms, on the same night as Barat's birthday party. As none of the other Libertines showed up, Doherty played it solo, but took their absence as an affront. So when it came time for the Libertines to start their European tour, Doherty didn't show. remaining in London with his various temptations. Bharat called the next day to tell him, unless he plans on cleaning up, not to bother joining them. With the Libertines touring without Doherty, rumours swirled. Having spoken to Carlos, it is true. He doesn't want to play with me in my current condition. There is no use moaning. I'm getting on with things without them. Fuck 'em. And fuck 'em, he did. While the Libertines were out touring in Japan, on the 25th of July, Doherty broke into Bharat's London flat, stealing an antique guitar, a harmonica, and a laptop. Admitting this to Lisa Moorish, his girlfriend and mother of his newborn son, she decided, for his sake, to call the police, at which point he was arrested. On the 8th of September, Doherty was sentenced to 6 months in prison, later through appeal reduced to 2, and the UK tabloids ate it up. Bharat was devastated that Doherty had done this, but did try unsuccessfully to withdraw the charges. He just wanted his friend to somehow get help. Amongst the drama, their standalone single, Don't Look Back Into the Sun, was released and reached number 11, resulting in a Doherty list Top of the Pops performance. Heartbreakingly, the song nods to Bharat and Doherty's fracturing friendship.
Oh my friend, you haven't changed. Still looking rough for living strange, I know.
Doherty spent most of his time inside trying to get his hands on a guitar. When I did get hold of one, it was unbelievable, because it had been 2 weeks or something, but it seemed like an eternity. I played Don't Look Back Into the Sun to myself, and I wept. I remember thinking when I played the guitar, I'm going to put it all behind me, and start again with Carl. I couldn't wait to play with him. Thankfully, the feeling was mutual. Bharat met him with a hug at the gate, when he was released on the 9th of October. With Doherty having been clean for the majority of his stay at Her Majesty's pleasure, though the Albion had taken on water, it was ready to set sail once again, at least for a little while. More so than on Up the Bracket, sessions for album number 2 were strained. Pushji had exited as manager in October 2003 due to the dysfunctional nature of the band, replaced by Creation Records founder Alan McGee. Given that he'd previously been in charge of Oasis and the Jesus and Mary chain, he seemed well suited for the Libertines, a man who greeted chaos like an old friend outside a prison. In November, McGee set up Bharat and Doherty in his house on the Welsh border, so they were able to compile their ideas. While What Became of the Likely Lads was born there.
What became of the dreams we had?
It wasn't long before Doherty's addictions crept in, and an argument arose between the two where accusatory barbs were thrown, with Bharat getting increasingly drunk on whiskey. The night's events concluded after Doherty went to bed, where out of drunkenness, lingering depression, and sheer frustration at the Libertines' precarious position, Bharat attempted to cave his own face in with a sink. I just looked at myself in the mirror, and that's what kind of disgusted me. I was on my own in the bathroom, completely pissed. In this situation, I didn't know how it happened, but knowing I hadn't done anything wrong, really. And I managed to conjure up all this hate out of nowhere, and I had become a hated person in some respects. And I just fucking belted my face as many times as I could against the sink. The resultant wound would require 70 stitches to the face, bone grafts to his shattered cheek, and Bharat went temporarily blind in his left eye. At the time, Enemy reported he'd fallen while drunk. The Libertines entered London's Metropolis Studios in March 2004, again with Mick Jones. For the sessions, McGee hired Doherty and Bharat, a bodyguard each, to stop them from killing each other. On the first day of recording, an argument about a digital recorder erupted into fists being thrown, after Bharat implied it was all about Doherty not being able to handle his brown. Doherty launched himself across the table and started pounding on Bharat, the bodyguards having to intervene. At that moment, I was seriously questioning whether the album would ever be finished. Some producers wouldn't have tolerated that behaviour, and the recording session would have been aborted. But as Jones had had a similarly volatile relationship with Joe Strummer, the sessions went ahead. Before the Libertines got in the studio, there was little in the way of pre-planning, and so when Jones asked what they were starting with, no one had any idea. As Can't Stand Me Now was the most finished, it was recorded first. It went swimmingly. We used the third take. You can hear the end of the take at the start of it. We left it in as it was appropriate, and all that. The song's closure features a harmonica solo from Doherty. Many have associated this with an interview where Borat had mentioned he gifted the instrument to his bandmates for Christmas, and as Doherty was now back being a libertine, he received one too. But this could also be a reference to it being one of the items Doherty stole from Borat, an event referred to in Borat's first verse.
Your light fingers through the dark, shattered the lamp into darkness, it cast.
Doherty, though, was always convinced that Borat started the fracture by blaming it on his heroin addiction.
No, you've got it the wrong way round. Just shut me up and blamed it on your ground.
Can't Stand Me Now had been written by Doherty sometime after the break-in, with some lyrical help from Mark Kedds, formerly of Senseless Things. I wrote that in Whitechapel with Mark. Well, he wrote a bit of it. Cole changed a few words around, but it was already written to play him when he heard it. On the demo of Can't Stand Me Now, it's just me singing it to myself.
His light fingers through the dark, he shattered the lamp into darkness, cast.
But basically, I got turned on, I think, by the idea of putting the words in his mouth, making them so personal, so he's singing them back to me. It was difficult on my part not to sing the line.
The
original demo features some even more tragic lyrics that never made the finished track. Like an indie rock version of Go Your Own Way, his lyrics were perhaps too personal, bitter and close to the bone.
I know you lie, I know you lie, I'm still in love with you.
During the last show of their 3-night residency at Brixton Academy in March 2004, they played Can't Stand Me Now as the last song of their main set, and Doherty, offended by his lyrics coming out of Borat's mouth, stormed off stage after the first chorus. It had taken 6-7 years for him to say the truth. Can't stand me now. He sang it to me and I thought, you're right, we've used each other, got here, but underneath it all, you're not my mate. So I kicked his amp over, smashed his guitar, and cut myself up. Though they would finish the record, the Albion would soon hit the rocks. Can't Stand Me Now was released on the 9th of August 2004. It was the Libertines' highest charting single, reaching number 2 in the UK chart, being held off the top spot by Three of a Kind and Baby Cakes.
Baby cakes, you just don't know how I like it now.
Its parent album, self-titled, was released at the end of August and entered the UK album chart at number 1. And just like their debut, the album was warmly praised by critics. Said Anthony Thornton of NME, some of the most exhilarating and brilliant rock and roll of the past 20 years, destined to be glued to discerning CD players everywhere, from council estates to country estates. Britain was theirs for the taking, Arcadia on the horizon. Problem was, by this point, Doherty was again not in the Libertines. While he had tried to clean himself up with stints in the Priory and even flying to a Thailand facility to properly detox, he left prematurely from them all. The day he returned to London, he was stopped by police for driving a friend's car and arrested for being in possession of a flick knife, a supposed gift for Borat. Feeling that the cycle of abuse would never end, Borat made the decision to let Doherty go. As he wrote in his statement to the press, Peter is and always will be a libertine, and when he cleans up from his addictions, he will be immediately welcomed back into the band. What should have been a victory lap instead was an awkward mess. Here was what the press had been touting as Britain's most exciting band, having smashed album number 2, with a tour of theatres and prestigious festival slots ahead of them. And yet the Libertines had shipwrecked just off Arcadia, while Doherty went on to form Baby Shambles. Bostonian guitarist Anthony Rossomondo filled the Doherty-shaped hole for the rest of the Libertines' commitments. By the end of the year, it was over, said Jeff Travis, head of Rough Trade. Imagine if they had played Reading Festival with a fully functional band. They would have torn the whole place apart. It was all set up for them to be the kings. The 2004 Reading Festival lineup shed light on how vitally important Libertines had been during their 2 years in the spotlight. Below them on the main stage bill were Franz Ferdinand and Razorlight, with Block Party, Kasabian, The Ordinary Boys, Futureheads, Cribs, and Kaiser Chiefs on other stages, all benefiting from the Libertines reigniting the British indie rock scene. Soon the Fratellis, Kooks, View, and Mystery Jets would also follow. But with their love of slang-infused wordplay and haphazard punk-pop jangle, the Libertines' clearest and biggest heir was the Arctic Monkeys. Eventually the Libertines reformed in 2010. Doherty and Brat finally getting back together to headline the Reading Festival like they should have done in their prime. And while What a Waster, Time for Heroes and Don't Look Back into the Sun all show them in their raucous finery, Can't Stand Me Now is their essential track. Is the Brat-Doherty relationship writ large, all the bickering, fighting, makeups and breakups encapsulated in 3.5 minutes, is them at their best of times and their worst of times, a slice of Arcadia they never properly glimpsed. Thanks for watching. What's your favourite band to come out of the noughties British indie wave? Comment down below and like, subscribe and hit that bell. I'd like to shout out my new top tier supporters: Ferret Fire, Shannon Siegel, Tomislav Jovanovic and Dusan Dudaran. Thanks a bunch to all that support me, and I'll see you in 2 weeks for something from the other side of early noughties rock.